especially with my collaboration and participation with the National Center. I think it's very exciting. I'm excited to be here for some other reasons too. As maybe mentioned, I've been involved in looking at how virtual reality technology can be applied to medicine for 30 years now, 30 plus, and it's finally taking off. And so I'll talk about how it's taking off. I mean, we're still in some ways at the early days. It's sort of what I'd like to call the 300 baud modem days, where we see the potential, but it's not really there yet, but it's going to be there very soon. The title of my talk has the word transform healthcare. That might seem a little strong. I think maybe impact or effect, or I think it will transform healthcare, but it's going to be in an upwardly compatible way with the way we're currently doing things. VR technology is a tool, and it complements what we're already doing and extends the reach of the clinician and allows us to do some things that otherwise we cannot do. And I'll talk about that. But I'm excited to be here for those reasons and to see what can happen in terms of collaboration with the people in this room. I'm very excited to be associated with the National Center. Our mission statement is up here. And as Mimi mentioned, contact Sarah Berry if you want to come by for a demo and learn more about what we're doing. I'm going to pick up the pace on my slides a little bit. Matt Vogel suggests I skip every third word, so I can get everything in. But I have a lot of material to go over, but I also want to have some questions and learn from you. So please, if there's something you disagree with or you're angry about or you really like, say something. Let's have this be a bit of a dialogue if possible. When I think about the things that many people worry about, that I worry about in terms of my children, there's 4 major categories out of many. And in particular, the healthcare crisis and the aging population is something I worry about. Stanford has a center on aging. We call it the Center on Longevity because we look at the whole lifespan. And for a while, I was in charge of the mind division, looking at cognitive aging. And if you look at the demographics, and the nice things about demographics is that they're very predictable. They're not theories. We can look at what somebody's age is now and add 10 years, and we know how old they're going to be in 10 years. And if you look at the demographics of aging and the aging population, we're soon to become top-heavy, already top-heavy, with smaller family sizes, aging boomers. There's going to be a large percentage of people, just as soon as 2020 and 2025, who are in their 70s and 80s, and not as many people to support them both in terms of caregivers and economically. And that means we have to do something. With 2 out of every 7 people in their 70s and 80s having neurodegenerative disease and other chronic health care conditions, we can't afford to do business as usual. We can't build enough buildings. We can't come up with enough. We don't have enough health care providers to address this aging problem. And my opinion is the best way out of this is to use technology. And I'll talk about some of the ways that it's happening. I'm going to go through the part sort of fast. We can come back to it if there's questions later. There's a revolution going on right now, a digital health revolution, moving to mobile health, e-health, wearable sensors. It's becoming more patient-centered. The point of care is no longer always at the clinic. It can be at the home or wherever the patient is with a cell phone or a mobile system. And it's also leveraging some of the technologies out there, social systems, collaborative. We're seeing a transformation. And almost every medical device is being reinvented as a digital device, ranging from inhalers to thermometers to sphygmometers. Everything is becoming internet-enabled, and that allows us to do a lot. And there's this whole movement, the quantified self movement. I know some of you are out there where you measure everything, and you study everything in your sleep architecture, and you keep track of your calories. It's getting better with better sensors and better wearables. And that allows us to do a lot of analytics. We can do more personalized medicine. We can come up with subtypes of populations for depression and anxiety disorders, and we can see what works and what doesn't work by doing the big data analytics. And of course, the tech companies are getting involved in this, bringing AI technology and machine learning and deep learning to it. It will allow us to do much more precision medicine, and that's a whole exciting field right there. But with data, we can understand what's needed to be done, and we can do things in a dynamic, sometimes telemedicine manner. So part of this revolution, and the part I'm particularly excited about, is how virtual reality technology is going to read on it. Here's sort of my summary slide. We've had 30 years worth of background research on VR, the technology used to be very expensive and cumbersome and poor graphics, but we still did research and found out what works, what doesn't work, and what to watch out for. But now it's becoming affordable, and there's applications for prevention, evaluation, treatment, training, chronic disease management, and it's poised to move right now from what's a laboratory situation out into the real world. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So VR, and I also should say I'm talking about AR technology too. It's going to impact medicine in a variety of areas. All aspects of the care chain, from prevention wellness to better assessments to better interventions, pushing out to remote areas, management of chronic conditions, but probably more important, and this is very important for the field of behavioral medicine, is improved adherence. And again, my story is back when I had hair, I was a grad student, I got involved in this, and it's been a really wild ride. Back in the day, the head-mount displays, we had to counterbalance them with a brick they were so heavy. They cost $70,000, and they weren't very good. And we used a $500,000 computer to do the graphics. Now you can buy something that's more comfortable, more functional, more powerful than what we had back in those days, and use your cell phone to do it. Now, mobile VR using cell phones is not that great right now, but it's pretty good, and it's getting better every generation. So it's been wonderful to see this evolution. I've had a few false starts trying to move the technology out of the lab. I went to Sichuan after the earthquake at the invitation of some of the psychologists there because they had 50,000 or more, mostly children, who had been in buildings that fell down during the earthquake and had PTSD. And they didn't have enough psychologists to address that. So we were hoping to use VR, which had been shown to be very effective for combat PTSD and for other forms of anxiety disorder, to help them with their traumatic experiences. It was too expensive and it worked, but we couldn't scale. But the good news is that we can scale. Every major technology company is putting billions of dollars into VR technology. Facebook, Samsung, Sony, Oculus, HTC, Microsoft, Samsung, they're all putting billion-dollar bets. And it's not just the tech companies. The government of China has put aside a $10 billion fund for VR infrastructure development. There is a $125 million venture investment fund looking for startups right now. So it's very significant in terms of what's happening, and it's going to happen really fast. There's a lot of startups out there right now already developing applications. Many of them are in the medical arena. And the projections are pretty awesome. They're projecting right now, and again, it's leveraging cell phone and internet infrastructure, is that within 3 years, we'll have 30 million users of VR technology. So this is taking off faster than the internet did, faster than smartphones took off, and again, I think it's a very powerful enabling technology. And again, when I talk about VR, I'm not just talking about fully immersive environments, I'm also talking about augmented reality systems where you overlay on the real world a projection. And that's particularly useful for things like stroke rehabilitation. And sometimes we don't even wear anything at all. We have rooms that we can step into. We call them caves. We're looking for a better term. It's an anagram. But we have rooms that you can step into and have a shared VR experience with other people. So again, there's a long list of applications. I'll go through some of them and say why they're very powerful. But I think as the cost of healthcare rises, we have to be creative. We have to apply new technology to drive down the costs, get better results. And this is one area where there's great potential. And again, there's a foundation of research. There's labs that have been studying VR for helping with anxiety, helping with depression, helping with traumatic brain injury and stroke, helping with surgical skill training. And they've been doing this for a long time, and it's ready to migrate out into the clinical world. I break it down into 4 categories: health and wellness, training, better assessments, and then better interventions. And there's a long list. Surgical skill training, clinical skill training in general, interpersonal skill training, team training, so you can practice how to respond. I was part of an exercise that Portland, Oregon did using, in this case it was a flat-screen VR system, where they got all the first responders, the hospital emergency department, police and fire department collaborating to rehearse from a dirty bomb incident going off in the city, how to respond. And they did this in a virtual environment, and they could decompose what happened, who said what to who went where, and do some analytics on it. So it's great for training. And also, and this is really key, virtual environments are fantastic for teaching empathy. I can put you in somebody else's point of view, and you can have an experience of what it's like to be someone of a different gender, or a different ethnic background, or different economic background. And it's actually very profound. How many people have tried a VR system? Wow, that's incredible. 6 months ago, I bet it would have been only a handful of people saying that. So it is taking off really fast. Did you like it?
Incredible.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody hate it? Anybody have a bad experience?
The swing.
Yeah. Some people have trouble with some of the higher places. Yeah, you have trouble with the swing. We have, of course, used virtual environments in the medical arena for many years at the very amazing and very expensive simulation centers where people fly in to learn a particular process using a simulator, and here's an arthroscopy simulator. This has been used for a long time to train, but it's expensive and it's location-based. The next generation is going to be using systems that can be done at the clinic. If somebody's trying to learn how to use a new tool, maybe they've been trained on one surgical system and they need to learn another system very rapidly because it's the only one on the shelf. Here's just a quick example of a training system on how to plan to place a tibial nail. So you can see that he sees operating environment, he sees the tools, he's getting some haptic feedback from the sensor systems, and he learns here's another example. This one's a little old, but I like this one because it's for team training, and it's also a little bit gamified, where they have, once you learn the procedure, you can go on to the next level and compete with other people. But this is, I think, for training on how to do a dialysis procedure. And this can be done any place. It can be done, you can rehearse, you can figure out what you do wrong, and learn what to do something rather than learning on the job. And of course, three-dimensional interactive environments have been used as part of radiological imaging and procedure planning for a long time. And that's becoming less expensive now that we have better ways of looking 3D environments. And there's a group at the Stanford Cardiology Department is bringing in people for training them on new surgical procedures. They're filming everything in 360 video, and there are a lot of people to take it back with them to the countries they come from to train the other residents. So it's a great way to transfer knowledge in a more you are there type of manner. Better assessments, psychological assessments, measuring activities of daily living and functional ability, physical medicine, and again, behavioral medicine, psychology, and psychiatry. We can now have ecologically correct environments where we study someone's behavior instead of a paper pencil test. So there's a whole library of next generation assessments that are in the process of being developed. Now I'm moving on to interventions. We've talked about stroke rehabilitation, but it's also recovering from neuromuscular injury or from some sort of trauma, speech therapy, optical rehabilitation. There's some great systems out there to help with strabismus and amblyopia. And then pain management. We'll talk a little bit deeper about that in a few minutes. There's a long list of behavioral medicine, helping with drug and alcohol abuse, schizophrenia, PTSD has been big, generalized anxiety disorders, mood disorders, cognitive impairments, autism spectrum disorder. There's some fantastic things we can do there. Attention deficit disorder, phobias, obsessive compulsive. I'm not going to go through the list. If you don't see your favorite, this is a problem. It's probably a study. There's probably some and also on the health and wellness side to help people learn weight management skills, prompting them to exercise, grief counseling, addressing isolation, disability solutions. There's a whole spectrum of things that are being developed there too. So again, after 30 years of research, we're finally poised to be able to take this technology and move it out. And I should point out that because we have mobile VR, we also, where appropriate, can do telemedicine. Clinicians can be in one location looking at the data, and the patient would be having an experience in another location. And I've seen this used for Teaching more, I'd say, subclinical skills, like helping someone who has fear of public speaking, feel comfortable talking to a crowd, or people with... I'm still waiting for someone to come up with a dating simulator, so when you're 60 years old, you want to ask somebody out date, you practice with that. But it'll come. We're also leveraging some other technology. This is an example of some smart AI technology with avatars that are emotionally sensitive. They capture your facial expression and gaze direction, tone, and voice. And in this case, this is a AI bot, but it could be of any gender or any age group, interviewing this person. And this is being used for training on how to do a psychological assessment, but it can also be used where appropriate as a front end to someone who's trying to get help but isn't comfortable yet talking to a clinician. So I'll just run this for a second. But the point is we're leveraging technology.
Hi, I'm Ellie. Thanks for coming in today. I was created to talk to people in a safe and secure environment. I'm not a therapist, but I'm here to learn about people and would love to learn about you. I'll ask a few questions to get us started. And please feel free to tell me anything. Your answers are totally confidential. Are you okay with this?
Very smart about that.
Yes.
So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
That's good. Where are you from originally?
I'm from Los Angeles.
Oh, I'm from LA myself.
A lot of creators in LA.
When was the last time you felt really happy?
When was the last time?
So
I don't know.
You get the point here.
Yeah, I'm not someone who's really like, I don't have any real highs. I feel like I'm a level person. It's just happy. I guess to answer your question, probably a couple.
And it's been shown that people are more comfortable in some situations talking to something that's not a real person at some levels. It sort of breaks through the stigma barrier to some people who start the dialogue and push information. Let me give you some examples. Again, there's a whole library of situations, but I'll give a few of my favorite examples. And again, it doesn't have to be a head-mounted display. It can be in a little dome or some other environment too. Although with today's technology, the most immersive experiences are with the head-mounted display. We've done a lot of work for PTSD phobias doing exposure therapy for fear of flying, and my colleague Steve Rizzo has done a lot of work with a virtual Iraq and virtual Afghanistan to do graduate exposure therapy. It makes a big difference. And again, a lot of the vets feel more comfortable coming in to work with technology than just doing a talk therapy type approach. So in this case, it's usually done in a co-located manner where the clinician's there and going through an experience with the patient, and they do it in a graduated manner. This is a next generation assessment system. It's a virtual classroom that's used to assess attention and instead of an observational, subjective observation.
The virtual classroom attention evaluation system consists of a virtual classroom environment and utilizes the standard continuous performance test with multimodal distractions, as well as motion detection of the head, arm, and leg. The user takes a 13-minute test in the VR environment, and the CPT test results, as well as all movement data, are recorded. A test report is issued immediately that contains a personalized data analysis with clear data visualization. This may help parents receive a fast screening and assist clinicians to evaluate the ADHD diagnosis objectively.
So that's the key part, an objective assessment where there's a lot of data, because once we start doing a lot of testing, we can use AI, machine learning, deep learning technology to do better population analysis. So what I like about this type of approach is the objective assessments in an ecologically or realistic environment that can be standardized. We've seen a lot of uses of virtual environments in senior care to help with isolation and loneliness, address with acute and chronic pain, depression, rehabilitation, design for disabilities, post-discharge follow-up. And there's a large network of technology providers to the senior living communities making a commitment to use VR, not just to design the 6,000 new buildings that they're putting up every year where they design for people with macular degeneration or people using a walker, but also to have more feedback on the user experience of being in those buildings and dynamics. But the rich data from that environment is just incredible. So we're going to see a lot of utility there. Another example that I'm very excited about is the use of virtual environments to teach people who are struggling with addictions, nicotine, alcohol, substance abuse, situational confidence, and refusal skills. We can evoke the cravings in a clinical situation. We can teach people how to manage those cravings much better than imaginative therapy or role-playing in the office. And also you can practice offline. And there's also the possibility of anonymous support communities where people meet in a virtual environment and help each other. Another example I'm really excited about is stress inoculation. I worked with the CDC to come up with a system that helped when they were sending scientists into disaster areas or into Ebola areas. Some of the scientists never got camping, let alone at a disaster area. So to be able to prepare them for the events made a big difference. And one of my favorite projects right now is a project we're doing at Stanford called Project Braveheart. In this case, we are working with children who are scheduled for a cardiac procedure. We know weeks in advance what the worst day of their life is going to be. And they know it too, and they dread it. And so do their parents and their siblings and their friends. So what we've done is we've captured 360 video of the whole patient journey, starting in the parking lot, the check-in desk, hanging out in the waiting room, feeling uncomfortable, getting in the prep room. We show them the operating room, which otherwise they would never actually see. We show them the recovery room. And here's the cool part, is we green screen in kids who've had the procedure before. And they talk to them. They say, hey, we'll go into the recovery room now. You'll feel a little bit woozy. We also bundle in with it some training systems for mindfulness and relaxation so they can learn these skills in advance. And I don't know the results yet because we're still doing a study, but we're collecting objective data about stress and outcomes, patient satisfaction, and cortisol, for example. I'm sure that we're going to be able to reduce the anticipatory anxiety from this. If we don't, I'll be very surprised. What I've heard from the clinicians already is that the kids who are going down the arm of the study that have the VR are very happy, and the kids who don't get the VR are very unhappy about that. That's the sad part of doing a double-arm study. But I think we're going to see some, and this can be applied to a number of other stressful situations to reduce the anticipatory anxiety. Here's a quick video about that project.
Braveheart is an interactive VR experience developed to reduce stress levels in children who will be undergoing a surgical procedure. Patients and their families are guided through a 360-degree video tour of the hospital by a virtual companion. The gender-specific tour guide provides a friendly, approachable, and relaxing tour of the facility and introductions to doctors and key hospital staff. Along the hospital tour, patients visit the key rooms they'll encounter on the day of their procedure to help make the unknown more familiar. Children learn about parts of the procedure and can even practice mindfulness and relaxation exercises. The intuitive software design allows the user to navigate through scenes and applications, learning the hospital layout, all within Braveheart at their own pace, creating a first-of-its-kind, interactive, and immersive video environment. When Braveheart is finished, anonymous usage analytics are stored and available by scene, time, and engagement for analysis by doctors and researchers.
And I'll point out this, even though they were doing this for pediatric applications, there's a whole variety of situations where we can reduce the stress. And the 360 video to capture is really easy nowadays. You can do it with your cell phone even. So it's an easy system to develop and innovate, and I think we'll start getting some interesting results from not just this, but some other places we're working on. Another area that I'm very excited about is using VR for pain distraction. There's been a large amount of research, again using the very expensive early VR systems, showing that we can help distract people from painful procedure and help people with chronic pain learn stress and pain management skills. It's an alternative to some of the narcotics that people have to use in a situation. I'd like to show you a video now of a young man who had a degloving accident from his go-kart and lost most of the skin on his dominant arm. And he was unable to do the wound treating without a significant amount of anesthesia or sedatives. We gave him a VR system to try out for distraction and made it possible for him to go through those procedures instead of having to knock him out every day. And I'll show that very briefly. Oh, I forgot. With the VR pain distraction, we've been able to actually do a lot of medical imaging and track and understand how it's working and validate it's affected. And we do follow-up studies too to see how it's been helpful. And is it only a novelty effect where people get the experience and then later it doesn't mean as much, and it seems to persist. So anyhow, here's the quick video about blame. This is just a few weeks ago that.
Yeah, usually just like a little dip. Okay, great.
So he's mastered the art of getting your phone into a head-mounted display.
Look at him. Knows how to whip it right on and get it all going. Kids are so funny. When they brought it into us yesterday, it's like no one knew how to turn it on. And he's like, oh, I know how to use my light prepared. Oh, great.
Now I think he's swimming with some dolphins.
Swim, where are we? Jurassic Park?
Yeah. Ocean.
So the upper one was
sea
over
snakes.
24 hours, and the lower one was only 1. Yes.
Whoa! Oh my god, that thing's
So
like
the video is on
10 feet
trains
long.
moves. I'm not going to play the whole thing.
Oh wow.
He does feel pain, but
That is so cool. It's right there.
It's not blinding as much as it could.
That thing is.
And this is just
Oh wow. That's pretty cool.
And our plan is to start with the emergency department. Somebody's waiting.
Right, it's okay to start with
This is the
No.
have them through whenever they're in the hospital. With discharge issues. Start the
And we're gonna, and we're gonna pull, hold on, it's okay, listen, I'm gonna stand your arm straight up, and we're gonna pull your spleen.
Here's another example of how we're using VR to train clinicians how to give bad news. This was done back in 2009, so it's a little bit old, but in this case we used a video rather than a computer-graphic avatar because we want to take the micro-expressions. And this was used to train people on how to respond when somebody responds to you giving bad news, how to handle that situation. And I'll just show it very briefly here.
I'm so scared of getting breast cancer. I don't know how I can handle this. This is really hard news to hear.
So you can imagine how practicing this in advance with a variety of situations, some that you might not encounter every day, helps you do a better job of being empathetic and understanding how to respond, and reduces your stress level as a clinician when you're doing this very important part of interacting with patients. And all too often we have to deliver bad news. We also can train doctors to see things from another perspective, to see what it's like to we can take people into a place where somebody's living without much running water, and so they can understand why it's hard to change your bandages if there's only one bathroom and 20 people are using it. So there's great potential there for giving a third-person point of view of other people's experiences. Getting back to why this is racing forward fast, recently there's been significant investments in the area. A company called MindMaze just raised $100 million at a $1 billion valuation to come up with what they call NeuroVR. I think it's mostly focused on stroke rehabilitation at this stage. And another company, Reflection Health, also raised $7.5 million to come up with some VR home rehabilitation programs. That's just one example. Let's see how we're doing in time. I'm going to skip forward a little bit. There's a whole neuroscience about why this works, at least in behavioral medicine, and write to me and I can give you that information. But essentially, one of the reasons VR is particularly engaging is it's an experience. We involve all your senses. We can do smell, proprioception, etc. And you can have an experience that's much more memorable than reading about something, and it can be with other people, so there's a social component to it. We can activate the reward systems in a variety of ways that we can't do with just talking, and we can show progress. And to do that, often, one of the tricks we use is showing your future self. We age progress, your avatar. There's something called the Proteus effect, where you can have your avatar, but you have to interact with, see your avatar in the mirror and do a few things, and all at once you feel like that image, that virtual image is you. And then we show you what happens if you make certain lifestyle choices, and see your future self. And it's been a reproducible, robust phenomenon. We've been able to get, if you can imagine, well, it scares them quite a bit when we show the students what they're going to be like. And you get a 20-year-old student and show them what they're going to look like in 20 years. It's very upsetting. But when we start, we give them real money, and we give them a choice of whether to save for retirement or not with that real money. And the ones who've seen their future self spend money on saving for retirement. Those who don't see their future self don't. So it's a reproducible, robust phenomenon. And weight management, addictions, other situations where you need to have a reason to take it. Well, one of our problems right now is it's hard for us to see, when things change slowly, for us to see the effects of our behavior. And this is a tool to do that. So again, there's a lot going on right now. I think this is going to be a very important complement to the rest of the things that are going on as medicine is revolutionized. It's going to be important for us to do it right and create the right experiences and match them to appropriate clinical protocols. But it's affordable now, and the tools are there to come up with some great experiences. So that's my spiel. If you want to come over to our facility and get a tour, contact Sarah. And I'd love to talk further with people. I purposely went a little fast so we'd have some time for questions. So thank you very much. And I remember when some friends of mine were doing a day or two of meetings in a row, they would always get pizza at the end. And I said, why do you do that? And they said, well, that makes people sleepy, and then they go home. That's how we get them out of here. So I'm hoping that that's not the effect. Yes?
I wondered with pediatrics, do you have a recommendation about, or are you seeing about length of time in the virtual reality or in the augmented reality screen time?
It's a good question. The question is, how much time should you spend in VR, especially with pediatrics? And there's a couple issues. Number one, I'm sure there's going to be parents who are working 3 jobs who park their kids in front of the VR system. And they book kids who spend a lot of time in VR, regardless of whether it's a pediatric situation or not. And we just don't know. And this is a good research question. The long-term effects on the developing brain for being in an environment where things are a little different. We do a great job of simulating the world, but we're putting, we don't have the same vestibular-ocular connection, and we're changing how people interact. I mean, the screen's a few inches away from your face in this case. So what are the effects on the developing visual system? We don't know. Now, my own hunch is that it's going to be one of these situations where, we're in a boat or we're driving a car, we do this, we get out and we walk, and people change modes. But I don't know that for sure. And in terms of what do I see when we use it in the hospitals, most of the kids do it for 5 or 10 minutes, and then they're not quite comfortable enough, especially the mobile VR systems. Also, all the fun's out there in the real world too. I mean, it's great to play a game for a while, but your friends are out there. So until we have social VR, I don't think people are going to spend too much time in these. But it's an unexplored issue. I should say this: we did some work at our lab at Stanford, looking at kids and finding out what age group do they have trouble distinguishing reality from virtual reality. And there's a point where kids will have virtual experiences, and we ask them later, what was real? Did you see that polar bear in real life or not? And there's a point where a lot of kids have trouble making that distinction, recalling whether it was real or not. And so I think that's an issue to be concerned with too, especially with some of the violent games that are out there, which there will be. And that's why we have to move forward fast in medicine. It's come up with some good stuff, because there's sure going to be some bad stuff. Yes.
Curious to hear your take as to why AR and VR have been presented as a kind of pair lately. past couple decades of computer science research, they're often presented as kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, defined in contrast to each other. So why recently have they been kind of positioned as overlapping areas of research?
Well, I think it's because with AR we have to scan in the world, and we have to do a really fast job with processors of modeling that world and figuring out where things are. And then when we refresh the screen as we move our heads, we have to keep that in mind too. It's computation very complex, and doing the registration very hard to do. So I think there's been a dichotomy because the AR stuff has been so lousy that the VR people didn't want to be in the same camp. My impression is that there's a whole spectrum of immersion. And there's the fully immersive environments that we use for things that are painful, like post-traumatic stress or stress inoculation or phobias and anxiety disorders or pain distraction. But I think the AR systems, as they get better, are going to sort of merge with the VR systems. And I suspect that, I don't know, in 5 years, 10 years, we'll have some glasses we put on or a light field generator that projects things into our eyes, and we dial up the degree of immersion. But yeah, you're right. Right now, they're sort of two separate camps. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Because gaming software drives development margins, in technology.
Yes.
And just to go on, and so it would be great to have a world where medical development drove the technology, but we know that that's not the case given what's happened. Is there a notion of already, as a medical community, putting a baby system for VR and then doing post-traumatic? I mean, I imagine people will get some very bad, violent experiences from VR. And is there a notion of post-VR therapy?
Let's do it. Let's go after this. That's a need you've identified. Certainly the gaming community is going to develop this, and that's where a lot of the money is flowing right now for content development. But I'll tell you, I've talked to the heads of all these major technology companies, and they're hoping, and they'll fund projects because they want to see medicine. They want to see VR move from gaming and entertainment, like going to a concert and things like that, to the enterprise. That's where they're going to make the money because they're putting billions of dollars in it. It's not just going to come to the gaming community. So the gamers would be the early adopters. I met someone today who I was told to spend 2 months of rent money just to buy an Oculus system because she's a gamer. Yeah, you know what I mean. But I think the tech companies want us to develop medical applications, and they'll fund projects that we push in the right way. I think it's important. You know what I think is really going to drive this, sadly, is porn. That's like what drove a lot of VHS and the internet, etc. But we can leverage that and put it to our own sneaky purposes. And so yeah, I think a good defense is an offense. Yes?
Have you seen resistance from the medical community along the lines of this is for games, this isn't something we want to use, or have you seen that decline in recent years?
I did used to get that. I'm pleased there weren't so many protesters out front. And that's why when I proposed calling it an interactive simulation environment 30 years ago, I did it because I thought the clinicians wouldn't like the term virtual reality. It was too gamey. And to be fair, clinicians like to see data. They like to see reproducible studies. And the technology was so expensive before that we couldn't test a large number of patients. So I think most of the clinicians I'm talking to now are, also I think there's a generational thing. It used to be you didn't even have a laptop in your clinic because it was a barrier between you and your patient, and it interfered with the art of medicine. And that's all changed. So I think a lot of the old guys have died out, and some of them have sort of gotten excited. So it has changed. But to be fair, I think there's some work we have to do to validate, to show the value of this, and because it does, even though the cost has come down, it does cost something. So we need to show the value of this. And does it interfere with the workflow? Does it make more paperwork? What about recharging the batteries? We can't just voice new technology on a medical ecosystem and expect it to be adopted until we do our work up front. Yes?
Thank you very much. I'm very interested in this overlap of VR and the digital health and non-face-to-face visits, and love to know what you could comment on sort of the Moore's Law of that technology being stalled by our current financial models in healthcare and how we're going to get those closer together.
Yeah, nobody knows what's going to happen. Things are sort of up in the air. I think bundled payment was driving people to find creative ways to do things differently. And medicine is moving to more of a value-based system rather than a reimbursement code-based system. So I think some of the economic changes are going on. I also think this allows a lot more people to take care of themselves inexpensively at home. With if I have a stroke or an injury, I'm going to sign up for a $20 a month subscription to get better feedback rather than the Xerox sheet of paper that I might be getting. So I think regardless of what happens economically, and also it's not just us. Europe, China has spent billions of dollars on this, and they have a huge healthcare problem. And they don't worry as much about reimbursement or regulation. So I think it will happen. But I haven't quite figured out how to skate through the potential challenges in the economics of our healthcare system. I'd love if you have some insights or suggestions.
Oh, I have it all figured out.
That's great. Yes.
There was a recent TV show that had about 6 episodes. It was about a hospital that employed virtual reality in their present-day world. Are you familiar with it?
I don't know. I'd love to learn about that.
Yeah. It was called Genius or something like this. I'm not certain. I saw about 6 episodes. I was very captivated by it because it took everything that we're doing today, but employed virtual reality within their system.
Oh, that's very cool. Oh, that's great. I was a little worried you're going to see Black Mirror, which is a dystopian view of new technology sometimes. So, I'll track that down. That's great to know. It is happening. The University of Nebraska Medical Center in Omaha has put aside $104 million for medical VR. Other groups are getting involved in this. I think their focus is more on, I think they're putting a building up, which I think you don't need to do nowadays since it's distributed technology. But I think it is, that's very good news, actually. Thank you for that. Because I think it is migrating out of the lab and being used in clinical practice. Yes?
So you mentioned that more research is being done to estimate long-term effects, adverse effects. Do you know of any short-term adverse side effects of using this? And because of that, is it not reasonable intervention for some of this work because of this?
I have to say I haven't really heard of anybody saying, we had a bad experience using VR with the kids in our hospital or with our patients doing this. But you have to be mindful, it's the early adopters who are using it. They sometimes find a way around the problems or they ignore the problems. I think our technology now is above the point where it makes people nauseous unless you don't really calibrate. I think we should be concerned about sterilization and putting the same head-mounted display on one person and giving it to someone else. I think there are things we should pay attention to, and we need to do a better job of understanding where it goes wrong. But to be honest with you, I've not really heard someone say it was a disaster, it didn't work, or 1 kid out of 5, or one of my patients hated this. And we've done a lot of work with a whole spectrum of people, from people in their 90s down to youngsters. With really young kids, we don't have the head-mounted displays that fit very well, so we use a flat screen. But no, I can't say I've really heard of anything adverse. But I'm not really, since I'm an advocate, people don't tend to tell me those things. Yes?
So I teach anatomy to healthcare profession students here. So I've been tracking all of this, and there's a theory that those can manipulate anatomy mentally and rotate these structures to better understand the anatomy better. Is there anything to suggest that VR or AR could endow students with those types of skills if they don't have them coming into anatomy class?
It's a good question, and especially for things like radiology or surgical planning. Being able to think three-dimensionally is really important. We did some real early work back in the 90s where we took some cognitive assessments involving 3D rotation, and we had people practice doing the 3D rotation in the virtual environment, and they learned to do it better. People who aren't very good, like I'm not very good at thinking three-dimensionally, people who practice doing it in the virtual environment got better at it. And I suppose when people do learn to think 3D as a radiologist, that's what they do. Maybe some people have natural predilection, but if the question is, can you train it? Yes. And can this technology help? Yes. And I think, instead of me answering, let me ask you some questions. What do you think? How would you use this technology?
Yeah, so a common teaching strategy would be you're looking at this small space in the skull, but you can't really get in there. The senior anatomist will say, okay, this space is a room, and this is the ceiling, and this nerve is going above you, and then behind you, there's this artery. So I want to shrink the student down and put them in that space. And I've got the cardboard viewer, and it's all there, it's all ready to go, but how to create that fossa and then get students in there and then see if that helps them understand. Here's a 2D slide, here's a 2D slide. And as an instructor, I can kind of appreciate how things are moving, but to the novice, it's an even more difficult foreign language to them. Just think about this in 3 dimensions. Well, not everybody can do that.
Yeah, and the key is interaction. And where you may find a problem with just the Google Cardboard situation is that in order to really have a virtual experience involving 3D, you need to get your hands in and maybe your legs if you can. And also with mobile VR, we don't get all the ranges of motion of the head. So hold on, soon the technology will be a lot better. I'll link you up to David Axelrod, who's come up with some great surgical training programs for residents that they find for their boot camp. And he's done a great job for in his area, especially with communities, some great fly-throughs and ways of looking at things from a perspective. And keep in mind, we can speed things up, we can slow things down, we can allow people to do things at their pace and at their vantage point. So it is a great tool, I think, for that aspect of education. And also can be done offline. People can go home and try it too. So it's, I think, I think that for some aspects, the 3D part isn't that important. If you're trying to teach someone how to do a laparoscopic procedure, being able to see the 3D is not as important as getting the haptic feedback. But for what you described, that's a perfect use case. Okay, I can tell the pieces make everybody sleepy. Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank my collaborators at the National Behavioral Health Innovation Center. They're really pioneering in this area, and I'm very excited to be here with them. Thank you very much.
Walter, I would like to introduce you.
Pardon me?
Do you have time to want to introduce you to a couple of people?
Okay,
Is that
sure.
okay? Do you have
Yeah.
time?
I think so, yeah.
Quickly read the